Continuing our analysis of Budget 2023 presented earlier today by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, assessing the infrastructure spends and how they are likely to invigorate the economy or keep it on the growth track, assessing whether the rural focus is adequate, deep and wide enough. And I think I've got the three most perfect guests to reflect on that. Let me introduce them. Ajit Gulabchand, Chairman and Managing Director, Hindustan Construction Company; Piruz Khambatta, Group Chairman of Rasna; and DK Sen, Senior Executive Vice President, Development Projects, Larsen and Toubro. Thank you for your time. Let's get straight to it. The biggest headline for you, Mr. Gulabchand, out of this budget, I'm presuming, was the 33% increase in the outlay on capital expenditure by the government of India. Or have I been too presumptuous?
No, most certainly. It's 30% more than last year, which is quite a substantial amount. But it must be seen in the perspective that if you really wish to have real big-size infrastructure which this country deserves and needs for its growth, it should be at least 8 to 9% of GDP. This is just about 4.5–5% of GDP. So to that extent, it doesn't fulfill the real need of the country. But it's 30% more than last. Given the environment, economic environment around the world, and the fears of what can hurt you again and again, because we are interconnected, I think this is a very good spend in the right direction, and with an eye on the fiscal deficit stability, which gives a signal to the world that we are being prudent and yet keeping on the growth path. So I'm happy that this spend is coming.
Mr. Sen, I'm going to draw you in right away on this. Add to what Mr. Gulabchand has opined.
Yeah, actually very good news for us. Yes, he's right. The more the merrier for us, because a lot of backlog to be cleared, infrastructure being the mainstay of the economic growth. 111 lakh crore, hardly about 50 to 60% have been already awarded. The balance has to be awarded. So a lot of fast track work to be done. I think 10 is okay this year, but next year maybe more. Or overall, effectively, they've increased 13.7 lakh crore, which is about 33%, as you said. Most importantly, the state infrastructure capex expenditure, which was lagging, they have incentivized the state by giving 1.3 lakh crore long-term loan kind of a subsidy, which they have to spend within by 2024 end, which is good for us to make sure that the overall infrastructure expenditure will go up. A lot of jobs for us. Similarly, private infrastructure spending also must come up. I'm sure government doing right things to make sure the private capex also comes into the picture. What is most important is that government is looking forward to growth-oriented budget and technology-driven budget. The Construction Skill Development Council, the entire thing coming into the technological platform, which means that government can track it, monitor it and increase it. India is a large number of construction workforce. This is a good direction towards it. Also, I think this manufacturing sector, more inclusion towards the green energy. 35,000 crores allocation in the energy transition is very good, out of which our 19.7 thousand crores into hydrogen. So all areas manufacturing is also being given good priority.
I'm going to come back to the point that you mentioned about capital outlays and the lag in execution. And that indeed is an area that needs further reflection. But agriculture, the rural economy, how to stimulate it, how to spur consumption demand, matters close to your heart, Mr. Khambatta. So I'm going to ask you to put all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle as it relates to rural India, as it relates to agriculture, because if I may say so, you've got your finger on the pulse of what people are thinking and doing beyond the big cities.
I think if the Amrit Kal dream of the Prime Minister and the first thing in the budget they announced is Amrit Kal budget. Now what is Amrit Kal? In my mind, Amrit Kal is no Amrit without the rural people being part of it. And if you ask me, we have two Indias. So for me, that India is very important. Now, having said that, I think there are some specific announcements in the budgets, which I think I'm very happy. and most of them are technology and oriented, forward-looking oriented. Generally, when we talk of agriculture, we only talk of minimum support price and we talk of subsidies here and there. No, here they are talking that, for example, millet hub, that we will make the world to start eat millets. Now, if the world can have minestrone soup and tomato soup, why not a bajri soup? Like we are doing a bajri soup and suddenly it is catching off, people want it. Or let us say a snack made of some ragi and things like organic. Now, just teaching the farmer to make organic rice is not important. Convert it into biryani and making frozen biryani for the world is important. So, government is trying to integrate all the ideas, agriculture, food processing together. Then there were accelerated technology fund, especially for startups in the agri sector, which I think is very important because that's where I think we want the youth to stay in the villages, come up with new technologies and do their stuff. So these are the positive announcements. The fact that cooperative societies are being encouraged. Now for farming, it is very important. Some of the biggest successes in India in dairy farming have come out of cooperatives. Now imagine if the cooperative model of dairy sector is replicated in agriculture crops. It can be a game changer. While industry can be a processor.
Point.
But yes, that is, if you ask me, I see a lot of benefits given to to cooperatives. Now that is in my mind good. And I don't think we compete with cooperatives. We complement each other when we say industry. We can work with the cooperatives. They can make the produce and probably do semi-processing, and we can do the secondary processing and export it, which probably they can't do, and bring it to the world. So these are the type of things which I'm very happy about in the budget. But very importantly, I'm also happy that she has kept the fiscal deficit in control and is wanting to keep it in control. There was a time when India used to be seen as a sort of irresponsible economy. Our bankers were seen, see, they are drawing a lot of money. Today, our RBI is being sort of saying, oh my God, see how they can keep the rupee under control relatively. And same is for the deficit. As a country, with a country like India keeping the deficit in control after COVID, after all this crisis of whatever Ukraine, I think it's quite creditable. And then she's giving a target that I'll still lower it. That is, I think, very positive news. And I think when we are getting this G20 presidency, it's a good news we are, the message we are sending out.
Okay, I mean, it's almost a compulsion because when there's an uncertain world environment, India's certainly got to be as fiscally prudent as possible. Mr. Gulabchand, I always keep the tough ones for you because you're a veteran and you've analyzed many budget speeches, but academically, the pronouncements all sound just right. The question is in implementation of many of the ideas. And the question is, how receptive is industry to some of those ideas? So for example, and I'm just taking one example, you don't have to stick to that, the idea of spurring startups linked to agriculture. Fantastic idea, nobody can criticize it. The question is, will those things take off? So I want you to wear that critical hat for a moment and point out some things where...
Let us understand one thing, that the task of making a budget in a country as complex as India, with what is happening presently in the world, is a very difficult task. And to have kept your pulse on the fiscal deficit and signal to the world that we will be fiscally prudent whilst we chase our goals of spending more on infrastructure. Reducing tax is a good thing, leaving more money in the hands of the people.
And indeed nudging people towards the new tax regime.
Nudging towards the new tax regime. But see, the tax has both sides. As Chancellor of the Exchequer Dalton once said, you pay tax, you buy civilization. On the other hand, there is also the philosophy, leave more money in the hands of the citizen and you will get growth. Because you will get investment, you will get employment. So a balance between these two has to be maintained, and I think that's being done very well. Given that this is the last budget before the elections really, because next year the budget would be just a short one. When you see that, it hasn't therefore been so populist as to destroy the balance sheet. And I think that's a wise thing to have done. When you talk about the time lag, yes. When you say this much money will be spent, which means that those many infrastructure projects must be developed and ready for construction. Then only will it be spent. This is true. This is true of every given year's budget. And we have seen things happen. I'll put it in an odd perspective. For years we came across shamefully to our airports in India. And then suddenly we found this Wonderful
Transformation.
experts, transformation. We're not talking of transformation today, transformation 10, 15 years ago. They're already old, but they did happen. So there are many things that do happen. And we must bear with us that we have a very large population. We have a little bit of a slow start to begin with. Socialist India made it even slower. And
So
now
we've
we
got-
are on a different.
Okay. Mr. Sen, is there a glaring gap in your opinion, an area that you would have liked to see addressed, which hasn't come through, and you'll have to park your hopes for later?
I think I actually agree with him, but now the problem, as you touched upon the last question when you asked me, the execution is very important. The government must do everything possible to make sure the execution is done at the same rate when government is announcing projects. Gati Shakti, which has brought a lot of energy and hope in the whole system, is still not taken off properly. Not all the in the ministries have signed up. If Gati Shakti is implemented in full force, I am very sure the implementation task will be much simpler for the contractors. Still, it is a very big difficulty for us to push project at the side, on the ground. Further, the long-term loan, the long-term low-interest loan availability for developers is very important. DFI was announced with a lot of fanfare, but it didn't take off really. Hardly very, very small progress has happened. Actually, government was supposed to give, I think, about 4 to 5 lakh crores through this DFI. This also has to take off. So things which will actually ensure that fast-track growth of the infrastructure implementation are to be ensured by the government, which is...
And they're a work in progress, that's what you're
Work in
saying.
progress, yeah.
They're a work in progress. So while the outlays may be ambitious, the real nuts and bolts work comes in terms of implementing ideas like Gati Shakti. Mr. Khambatta, again, simple question to you. A miss, an absence in this budget?
Yes, of course, I believe there are absences, but to name a few, let us say, for example, taxations of cooperative sector has been looked into. But what about the limited liability companies? The partnerships. In India, still people don't want corporatization. They work as LLPs. Now they are to pay the personal tax. I don't think it is the right thing. You actually
But was
LLP,
it realistic to expect it this time around?
But if you can rationalize the tax for cooperatives, you can say, okay, cooperatives will pay the same tax as corporates. Then why not for LLPs and why not for partnership firms? And because of the simple reason that many of us don't want to get into the bother. When I say us, means smaller industries also want to get about the of corporatization. They are happy with partnerships. Secondly, mentally they are, their forefathers have had partnerships, so they are happy with the structure. Now to say no, you pay higher tax, in my mind, I have always been saying it should be at a common levels. Secondly, like in my recommendations, I always have said there has to be accelerated depreciation for high technology machinery. We need that. We need those type of things so that more technology can come in machinery. That is missing. Similarly, some benefits for exporters, because that is where we are lagging. Now exporters have to really do that extra mile of marketing abroad. We need some sort of benefits in terms of taxation. Earlier there was no taxation on exports. I'm not asking that, but so I believe that part, export related tax benefits, taxation is missing. Second, I heard, but I have not seen the detail, that insurance up to after a certain level is going to be taxed. Now that is not the principle of insurance. Insurance is something like, when you are old, you need some money in your booty. Now why tax it, if you ask me? So I think these are the
That's
type of
certainly going
things.
to be a prickly point.
So I somehow believe that these, and honestly nowhere in the world they tax insurance. This is something which is out of the because imagine insurance is never an investment. Insurance, if you are taking for your sort of safety, now tax that also. It is like taxing the piggy bank in the house. Now honestly, so these are the type of things I believe is something which you ask me a question. Of course there are negatives. So these are the negatives, I think.
Okay, well, I'm going to leave it at that, gentlemen. It's been good to get your perspective, and I hope over the next few days we'll get to talk more about it.
Yes.
Mr. Gulabchand, one final word from you.
Well, the budget must not be just a money collecting exercise, a revenue exercise. It has to be also meant for money kept in the hands of the people is also revenue.
But I think the finance minister articulated just how much tax she has foregone on account of the changes in the rates and the slabs under the new tax regime. So she tried to make that point that you are asking for.
She doesn't have to waste her sleep on it. It's in good hands. The people of India know better than her how to invest.
Okay. On that note, thank you very much. Appreciate your insights.
Thank you for the
Thank you. Right.